Great. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and open the Plan Commission here in City Hall in the city of Middleton on today, July 11th. Welcome to everyone. I'm going to start with calling to order and roll call.
Adams,
Here.
Bruce,
Here.
Erdman Hermans, here, Harp,
Here.
Haniro,
Here.
and Mayor Kuhn is present. Commissioner Summers is absent, but is hoping to join the live stream if she's available.
Thank you for letting us know. All right, starting with public hearings, 7 p.m. request. Is that supposed to be 6 p.m.?
It was scheduled for 7 p.m., so we will need to hold off and we will try to flag it for you as we get further down the agenda when we're able to open it.
Excellent. I appreciate that. All right, moving on to approval of minutes. Do I have a motion for the Plan Commission minutes of June 13th, 2022?
Madam Mayor, I have a correction, actually two corrections.
Great.
The word tenants in two places should be tenant, it's tenants and it should be tenant, T-E-N-E-T. And those are the only corrections. And I believe if there are no other corrections, you can declare the minutes approved as corrected.
Excellent. I will take that. Anybody else with corrections? And I will accept them as is and approve them and moving on. All right, agenda items, concept review, Aspen Commons apartment building at 1630 Aspen Commons. I'm going to ask staff for a background.
Mayor, before we start,
Yes.
I'm going to abstain from this item.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
All right. All right, can I have some staff background then?
Sure. Yeah. So this is a concept review for Aspen Commons. I believe most of the commissioners were here when there was another concept, I believe in October-ish. And this is a different concept. So it's a different developer, a new concept for the same parcel. It's now 12-story apartment building. I've also provided the plat that was created when the building next door, the Foundry Apartments, was built, and the CSM that was also included with that. And so staff, we don't really see much issue with it. There is the airport height limitation zoning that affects this property. And so I believe they are allowed 125 feet under the height limitation zoning. However, they've proposed, I believe it's like 140 something feet. So that is something that will need to be noted. They can, get a height variance to go above that, but that, adds on to their process.
Great. Can you move to a picture of it?
So that's the site plan. I can also show the elevation.
Okay.
So yeah, staff is just asking for any feedback since this is concept, on the height, the design, anything like that as well.
Does anyone have any comments?
I would comment that I like how the brick fascia on the first 5 stories is a similar height to the overall height of the foundry, and that there's a setback. It seems to tie in the 2 buildings a little bit more closely, that it's set between, but I would be in favor of reducing it 1 story to get it within the airport limitation.
A question for staff. The building next to it looks like it's taller. So would that have gotten a variance for the airport height?
I looked in the folder for that one, and I believe that they did go through the process and they did obtain a variance for that.
So getting a variance isn't impossible.
I'm sure it wasn't before the HLZ went into effect.
It referenced that they
It did?
got a
Okay,
variance.
okay.
Folder.
And I believe the developers are here if they wanted to give a presentation. Yeah, yeah.
Good evening. I'm Dwayne Johnson with Kenothi and Bruce Architects. I'm here tonight with John Leejay with LZ, who would manage and develop the property. They also developed the foundry, which is just north of our site. Our site is here in yellow, and Stephanie mentioned it's 1630 Aspen Commons. And there was a proposal back in October, but we're a different team and a different design. The site is 1.1 acres, and it's currently just a mix of pavement and gravel parking. Next slide, perfect. Our proposal is for a 12-story building. It would be 134 residential apartment units. The building is set back from Aspen Commons, a similar distance as the building to the north, Foundry, and the building to the south, the Greenway Office Center. There's also a setback from the south property line of 68 feet, which would allow the double loaded drive and parking area to remain. We've incorporated setbacks on 3rd floor and then again on 5th floor. And we're utilizing these areas for tenant community spaces and plazas. Next. The parking would be located on 3 levels. The plan on the upper right would be the underground level. It's the only underground level. And then we would have 2 additional levels, which would be above grade, and they would be partial parking levels with apartment units and lobby towards the street and then parking behind. I did forget to mention, but I think it was quite obvious, the side above us on this page would be the 2-story parking ramp that's currently existing. So our parking would face the parking ramp. We'd have units on Aspen Commons. There are 2, and our parking would total 130 units and then the 12 outside stalls. And then we also have the rights to additional stalls within the parking ramp behind us. Next slide. Floor 6 through 11 stack, and they set back from the rest of the building, and that's an important move to the architectural concept and massing of the building. And then on the penthouse level, we would have additional space for amenities and mechanicals. That plan is shown on the lower left. Next slide. This kind of gives a better idea. It's a section through the building. The black blob on the left there is the parking ramp that is existing. Our parking is the purpley gray on the bottom there. So our parking would face, the drive in between the parking ramp. And then the blue are our apartment units, lobby, and stairs, and that would be in the yellow. And the units that would face Aspen Commons would be walk-up type units with their own entries. Next slide. These are showing the massing that we're looking at for the building. This one's viewed near the office building. The office building is in the foreground there to the left, and our building is in the middle. The height would be slightly lower than the Greenway office building, which is in the foreground there. Next slide. The architecture is really in the infancy. We're just kind of starting to study the massing and the look of the building. This is viewed from the parking lot of Greenway, the shopping center. We're really leaning into the concept of matching or having a masonry base that kind of plays well with the foundry building, and then having a lighter, more modern tower kind of poke up from that part of the building. We're also, you can go to the next slide, please. This shows the foundry on the right and our building in the middle. We're really trying to play with that foundry look, but we're really trying to simplify it. I think our idea is to tell the story that the foundry was an existing building that was converted into an apartment. Our building was maybe a utilitarian type building or a warehouse type building that functioned with the foundry, but was maybe a little more simplified and more utilitarian. And then we added on above that. That story has been really successful with the foundry, of it being an old foundry building. People actually ask how that building's there with, you know, the age of what's around in that area. Next slide. And that's just another view closer to the foundry. Next one, please. So we are starting to play around with the colors and materials. These are by no means, you know, final. We're still playing with the colors and different materials, but again, we're trying to have it look like an old warehouse type building on the bottom, and then a lighter, airier, more modern tower, quite likely metal panel of different colors going up from that. So we're really excited about this site and the concept that is being developed. And we believe that there aren't too many sites within Middleton that could support this type of density and this type of building. But we feel that this project is appropriate on this site and that it would add significantly to the Greenway development, and it would kind of complete the backdrop to the Greenway station, and that it would create a successful transition between our neighbors to the north and south. So we definitely value your input, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for that. Does anybody have any clarifying questions or follow-up? And if you're speaking, please speak into the microphone for commissioners. Hearing none.
I did have one. These are market rate apartments, not condos.
Yeah, I did have that question. Thank you. Do you have any environmental questions? It's early. but-
It's early. I guess one question I have is, with this many new multifamily units, where will the parkland dedication be? And then I guess please comment on your willingness to get the variance from our airport height limit.
Hi, I'm John Lee, the L and LZ. My assumption on that was when we developed Foundry and this site concurrently, that when Greenway was done, the thought process for where the parkland was going to be, I assume, is in place, and that this is going to contribute to the parkland fund. That was my assumption. If I'm incorrect about that, I stand before you with open hands saying I didn't go through that when we did I didn't go through that when we went through Foundry. It was a fee in lieu of, and because it's part of the master plan and it's a rezoning from retail space into multifamily, it was something that I didn't think passed contribute, its contribution towards Parkland.
So, staff, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, I would just comment that this is an area where we've struggled with getting adequate parkland in the southwest quadrant of the city. It was something that our former mayor was really passionate about and worked really hard on. And we went through a process with our Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Commission where we identified around 10 sites and took it forward. And there really was not a lot of land available in the southwest quadrant of the city, and especially within the city's budgetary limitations. Every new housing development in the city that is adding residential units pays park fees. They all pay park improvement fees. And most multifamily infill developments pay park fees in lieu of land dedication, because when you're developing a very small site, you don't have land to dedicate for parks. We did recently add a new small park, which is very close to this property. It's just behind the, just on the other side of the parking ramp. So we do have a tiny little pocket park, and I'm working right now with our Parks and Recreation Director and PRFC. And we've identified another piece of property on Deming Way that is, I just quickly measured it. It would be a 1,400-foot walk, which is what, about a third of a mile. But it would be on the other side of Greenway Boulevard, and that sometimes is considered a barrier for walking. So it's a very, very difficult problem for us to solve. We have encouraged every new multifamily development in the southwest quadrant to incorporate amenities into the development that could help to serve the recreation purpose. But for public parkland, we're really struggling to identify options. We do have a small option on the north side of Greenway Boulevard, and we're working on acquiring a piece of land on the south side.
Yeah, in that vein, one of the trade-offs and one of the things we did going through the Pleasant View project is contemplating massing density around Greenway. And what does that mean? We have a space between Foundry and this project, which is the rooftop of the parking structure of Foundry currently, that will become amenity space. And we're very aware of adding amenity space to the terraces and the tops for people who are going to live in the building. It doesn't necessarily help the overall neighborhood or the overall park situation in the Southwest region, but we also understand we need space for people to interact. And if you look at the concept drawings, you'll see that we have a number of spaces contemplated. We did the same thing. If you go behind Foundry, there's a beautiful terrace and a bocce ball court, and we keep our people on property and happy. And we added a little, you actually allowed us to add a little dog park on the corner where there wasn't much space, but it's utilized and people really enjoy it. So that's the never ending quandary with infill projects, is how do you do it? And then is having the massing near all the commercial space worth the trade-off or not? And most of the time I think it is, but my vote doesn't matter. So hopefully that answered the question. And
it did. And then the airport question.
Yeah. I have no issue whatsoever. What drove us to that height is the economics make sense at that height, and being under the office building, I assumed that we would be able to get through the same process. If we can't, and we have to reconfigure the project, then so be it. I didn't want to come here and underdevelop the site. If there are things that force us down, then so be it. But I think that the Galway project on the pond site, which is on the agenda tonight, this project, I think adding density around Greenway is absolutely the right thing to do. And it's why we're going full steam ahead with our project on Pleasant View, which is only maybe 1,000 yards from here. To get those people massed around Greenway, I think is so good for the community. And Foundry has been so successful for us. And working in Middleton has been really successful for us. And that's why we're here. And we want as much feedback as we can get, because just because we think it's a good project doesn't mean it can't be improved.
Yeah, I'm speaking on that. Can you just share what is with the Foundry? Is it full? Is it almost full?
No, it's been full with a waiting list for probably 2.5 years.
Okay.
It had a brief hiccup when Market West opened, and that's just absorption. Like, I expect that on whatever glide path Pleasant View, this and Steve's project get built will all take a little bit longer to fill up. But the market is extremely deep. People love living in Middleton, and people wait for units at Foundry, which surprises me, but they do. So, I mean, that's real world feedback from the people that built, own, and operate Foundry. So it's why we're excited to put more units there.
That's what I was thinking. And over in Greenway Station, being beyond the Beltline, that height is pretty standard. So I do appreciate you sharing your insight. Alder Haniro, did you have?
If other commissioners have comments or questions, I'll defer to them right now.
I think it looks like a great project. Thanks for sharing it.
I would just concur with that. I think it's a great opportunity to get more people where there's amenities. And once we have people close to amenity spaces, those spaces can get filled with more everyday needs that support the community. And then it's on a bus line and it just starts to have a spiraling effect that continues to build community. I appreciate that you included community spaces very thoughtfully in the plan as well.
Well, standing at this podium a number of years ago when we all thought Foundry might be a silly risk, and that everybody asked when Greenway was developed to add housing, and the people who were doing it then thought that was a horrible idea and didn't want to do it. It's proven to be a wonderful project for us, and the level of commitment we're making between Pleasant View and this project is very large for us, but we're very proud to do it. And we think it's the right thing to do in the right place. So thanks for your time.
I did have one more question. Sorry.
It's no problem.
And okay, so Middleton has a policy goal of getting to 100% clean renewable energy across the community by the year 2050. So I view every development that goes in as either a chance to help us get to that goal or something that's going to hold us back. So my question is, what sustainability features do you envision building into this? Are you going to have solar? Would you be interested in no gas appliances in the building? EV charging stations?
I'll rattle down our list of things we have done, I guess, ahead of the curve, if you want to say that. We're very committed. I would love to be able to afford geothermal, but we are very committed to water source heat pumps for our heating system. That's an unbelievably huge benefit if you want to start ticking off ways to reduce the footprint and consumption. One of our average units heats or cools for a handful of dollars a month and uses very little fuel, and 72% of the system is the fuel that's used is electric. We put EV stations in. We have been trading back and forth the concept of how much roof amenity can we use for tenants versus can we actually get enough out of photovoltaic cells to make it worth giving up the space. And every project it's a back and forth. The project up on Pleasant View, it's fully entitled now, but it's got sloped roofs all around it, which lay out wonderfully. So we're going to work very hard to make sure that those sloped roofs on Pleasant View are used. This one, it'll be a trade-off. If we can't utilize the space for human interaction, you have to get enough square footage of the PV to have it help you at all, other than it just being a genuflect to doing it. I think the massing and the structure, the superstructure being concrete, the massing means the building's going to be there for 100, 120, 150 years versus a 4-story wood frame building that's going to need a lot more care over the same amount of time. I truly believe there's real value to that. We use all LED lights. We use no VOCs in any of our stuff. We're very conscientious about the life space we commit. The last 2 projects I've looked at adding wells to the heat pumps, and the math just isn't there yet. It doesn't work. It'd be fun to do it, but you'd have to have somebody help you do it because the math is terrible on it. But then you eliminate the gas boilers. We don't put gas appliances in. I think it's a horrible idea in multifamily. I think it's not safe. I don't think it's a great use of fuel source. So we don't.
Good. Great. Thank you.
Just like we did at Pleasant View, we'll look at Bird Glass. We'll look at all the things we need to look at. So the next time you see it, most of those questions should at least be on the drawings, and then you can pick on it if it's not correct. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate you answering that question. All right. Moving on to number 2, the acceptance of street names proposed in Bell Farm subdivision. Can staff provide some feedback?
Sure, I can do that. When the preliminary plat for the Bell Farm development came before the Plan Commission and the Common Council, we always embed our engineering staff recommendations into that plan set. And one of those staff recommendations was against using the names Mary Muse and Holly Way in Bell Farm. And the reason is that they don't comply with Chapter 8 of the city code that basically says that you cannot replicate a street name that's used anywhere else in the metro area. That preliminary plat comment is embedded into the recommendations for that development. So if we were to decide to reverse that, that would need to be approved by the Plan Commission and the council. And that is what our staff is recommending. And the reason for that is that after reviewing the ordinance with some of our public safety staff, they have indicated that they don't really use addressing in the same way that they used to for emergency response. And they did not express any concerns with these street names. They're not, I mean, there's a main street in every community. This is not that case. These street names are, a portion of them are used in another community, but it's not even a long street. I think that if I'm remembering correctly from my staff report, Holly Way is like a 2-block long street in the city of Madison. So given that our public safety personnel has not expressed any concern with these street names, we would first recommend approval of those 2 street names. And then second, we have proposed some changes to the ordinance. And we took that to the Public Safety Commission. Mark put together that staff recommendation. I believe it went before the Public Safety Commission in March. They also had no concerns with the ordinance changes and then referred it to EMS Commission and Fire Commission. Neither of those commissions have taken it up since. And after speaking with our city administrator, he recommended that we refer it simply to the chiefs of each department because those commissions are more, they more oversee the human resource aspect of those departments. And so he thought it would be more appropriate to refer it to the chiefs for their feedback prior to taking it to the council. So our second recommendation is to refer Chapter 8.111A of the city code to the fire and EMS chief with the recommendation that is outlined in the staff comments.
Do I have a motion? Starting with the names of, sorry, I lost the page.
I move approval of the names Mary Muse and Holly Way in Bell Farm.
Do I have a second?
Harp second.
Any comments or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the 2 roads names, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the updated, can you help me, Abby?
Referral of Chapter 8.111A of the city code to the fire chief and EMS chief with the recommended language changes.
Can you bring up the ordinance so we can see what the actual change will be?
Yes.
Thank you.
I had it in the other packet. That's why I'm off pages. So.
Okay, can you all see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so 811 street identification 1A. The language currently states a proposed street that does not intersect or is not contiguous with an existing street shall not be given a name already assigned to an existing street within the greater Madison metropolitan area or surrounding fire district jurisdictions. The use of an existing name, but with a different prefix or suffix, shall not be deemed to be a sufficient distinction to constitute compliance with this section. So instead of within the greater Madison metropolitan area or surrounding fire district jurisdictions, we'd be proposing replacing that with language that would specify specific zip code locations. And the reason that we've identified the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 zip codes that are included those are zip codes that overlap with our public safety service area.
Okay, so it's replacing more than Greater Madison metropolitan area. It's replacing the rest of that whole sentence.
Zip codes.
Resulting in a smaller geographic area.
And what happens with things like Century Place or Maywood Circle? Are those would seem to be not compliant with our ordinance? Is that correct?
No changes to those. They just.
Right. Right. But I'm just thinking, because when I first read this a few weeks ago, I was like, what's the big deal with Mary Muse and Holly Way? Because we've got Century Avenue and Century Place, and we've got Park Lawn Place. Well, that's a separate thing. But I guess I'm just wondering, when is it okay to have very similar names and when isn't it?
That's a very good question. The council does have the authority and has in the past overridden this chapter of the city code. So all street names will still go through a public process. They still need to go to Public Works, Plan Commission, and Common Council for approval as part of the plating process. So I think what we're trying to do is basically outline the notification that we would like to give to developers as they're putting their subdivision plans together. But then if a name ever does come forward that staff has concerns with, we could still reject that name.
The implication of the result of this is that our engineering staff will flag fewer street names because there will be a greater universe of street names to choose from. We have held ourselves to a higher standard in Middleton over the years because when you look at, for example, the west side of Madison, they've actually duplicated some of the names that we put in place first. And we can't do anything about that, but we're trying to provide some greater flexibility for our development community to select names that are fitting their development theme, if you will. For example, Red Tail Ridge wanted to do bird related names. And so this is an attempt to try and result in have more flexibility and have engineering staff flag fewer of these potential duplicates.
And just so you know, I was at the public safety meeting as the alder to the committee back in March. And so Chief was there when we had a robust dialogue on this topic. And I will not speak for him. I'm pretty sure he's supportive of the change. So do I have a motion to refer this new language to the fire chief and the police chief for consideration?
And it would be the fire chief and the EMS chief.
My apologies. And the EMS chief.
Bruce will make a motion to refer this to the fire chief and the EMS chief.
Do I have a second?
Bergman Hermans.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And thank you for that update and the descriptions. On to design review for Patio Compadres Mexican Restaurant at 1914 Aurora Street.
Yes, so this is for Compadres, which recently moved into what was previously the Hody. They are proposing to expand their outdoor patio into the landscaped area next to the sidewalk over there. So it's kind of these check mark areas. And I believe Steve Schulfer is here if you guys have any questions regarding any of the changes. They are, replacing all the landscaping, but I believe they are putting in some, plantings to, keep some of the green in that area. And then I believe, the engineering comments just had, they wanted updated impervious surface calculations and stuff like that.
Okay, do I have a motion?
This is Haniro. I'll move approval contingent upon addressing the engineering staff comments.
Do I have a second?
Erdman Hermans.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the design review for Patio Compadres Mexican Restaurant at 1914 Aurora Street, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. I'd like to acknowledge that Erin Summers is on Zoom. Her video is not working, but she's listening in. So let's see here. The next one is preliminary plat and specific implementation plan for a future public road for the Garden District Bruce Company redevelopment project. And according to staff, they wanted to delay. Is that accurate?
That's correct. They'd like to have this item deferred.
Deferred. Thank you. Do I need a motion on that or?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I would like more information. I'm wondering why can't we discuss?
So the applicant has scheduled a meeting for tomorrow afternoon with Mayor Kuhn, City Administrator Gatto and I, and they would like to discuss items related to the staff recommendation at the meeting tomorrow. We did follow up and clarify whether they would support us referring this item to the Parks, Recreation and Forestry Commission. And the reason that we followed up is because the city has a set time frame in which it can review a preliminary plat. It's a 90-day period. And so we were concerned that the delay may result in us having to administratively deny the preliminary plat. They did grant the city an extension to the review period of an additional 2 weeks. So the deferral would not result in any delay from that perspective. We also asked specifically if they would support us going ahead and referring the item to Parks, Recreation and Forestry Commission, but not discussing the agenda item. And they indicated that they would request that we not refer the item to the Parks Board either at this time.
With the 2-week extension and assuming at our next meeting, we refer this to Parks, how are we looking with the timeline for approving the preliminary plat?
Is it September 27th?
September 27th.
So plenty of
So
time.
originally it was the 13th and now it's the 27th. So that's just the 2-week delay that they're requesting.
Well, I guess I look at this is the second time the applicant has asked for a delay. First it was at the council or finance committee meeting for something similar and now it's for the plat. I don't mind deferring until our next meeting. I hope, Mayor, that you'll discuss with them the impropriety of putting stormwater underneath a park, which just seems to be one of the issues, and also emphasize the need for a minimum 3 acres of parkland dedication that's actually parkland that's usable.
Duly noted. Are you deferring? Making a
I'll
motion?
move that we delay discussion of the preliminary plat and SIP for a future public road.
Do I have a second?
Bruce will second.
Any discussion?
Is that to a specific date? Or are we deferring
I
it
think
2
it's-
weeks or?
Next meeting is what the staff recommendation is.
So just one rotation.
Okay, so.
Thank you for
make sure that-
clarifying.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, all those in favor of deferring the preliminary plat and specific implementation plan for a future public road for the Garden District Bruce Company redevelopment project, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. And just for the public to know, our online participant on the commission is not voting, so that unanimous vote is the people present. All right, so number 5, concept review, multifamily mixed-use project, 2159 Allen Boulevard. I will defer to staff for some background.
Yes, this is an application for concept review for 2 mixed-use buildings with 6 stories above ground and 1 level of below-ground parking. The applicant is currently showing retail on the Allen Boulevard west side of the first level of each building with at-grade parking behind it. Staff supports having a mixed-use component to this project and including additional density of development on Allen Boulevard, which is one of the best served transit corridors in the city. Staff also supports the inclusion of the 2-story townhomes on the Mendota Avenue north side of the northern building. That's a concept that we think is really a creative way to engage the street, and we've been recommending that on several projects. What is before you tonight is concept review. Concept review is not a required step in the development process. Concept review is also non-binding on the city because this project would require a zoning map amendment, also known as a rezoning, and that is an ordinance change. So there's a public hearing notice requirement, and there's also a requirement for the common council to approve that. Concept review provides the developer an opportunity to get initial feedback on a prospective development without investing in full architecture and engineering, which is a required step for a rezoning application. Should the developer choose to proceed with an application for rezoning, the city will follow its standard process, which includes a required neighborhood meeting held by the developer, a public hearing before the Plan Commission, noticed 2 times in the newspaper, on the property, on the city website, on the legal posting board, and mailed to nearby property owners. With guidance from the comprehensive plan includes many goals that support a project like this, including H1A from the housing section, which says support infill development where appropriate, especially in downtown Middleton and other areas well served by transit and in proximity to employment and commercial areas. Housing 1C, which says embrace transit-oriented development, TOD, especially along major roads connecting activity centers such as University Avenue, Century Avenue, Allen Boulevard, Parmenter Street, etc. And transportation strategy 4, which says create conditions that help transit become the preferred mode of travel for trips that are not made by walking, bicycling, or other micro-mobility solutions. However, the future land use map, or the FLU map, which is what the city uses to evaluate requests for rezoning applications, currently shows this property as single-family residential. This was discussed by the Plan Commission at a meeting on May 9th, prior to this application being submitted to the city, as one of about 30 changes to the city's comprehensive plan. Our staff proposed this change because the FLU map designation inaccurately shows single-family residential, which is not a designation that is applied to undeveloped land in the city. So if you go and look at the comprehensive plan at the FLU map, you will see 2 parcels of land that show single-family. Those are both being recommended for changes. Even the existing single-family neighborhoods in the city are designated established neighborhoods. This property is located along a major transit corridor, so it should not be designated single family. While this land has been used for private soccer fields, it is a high potential site for mixed use commercial and housing. During the comprehensive planning process, the Plan Commission did not wish for land within the city limits to be shown as single family residential, and like I mentioned previously, even existing single family neighborhoods are shown as established neighborhood. At the meeting on May 9th, the Plan Commissioners supported by consensus the FLU map changes identified by staff, with this parcel being divided to allow for lower density housing along the Middleton Beach Road side of the property across from the existing single family residential, and designating the western portion of the property as avenue mixed use, which is consistent with both sides of University Avenue east of Park Street and is also consistent with the Middleton Springs and Harbor Athletic Club areas on Allen Boulevard. The goal during that discussion was to allow a higher density mixed-use development on the west portion of the property while encouraging missing middle housing along Middleton Beach Road and serving as a transition to the existing single-family areas. While this consensus action took place prior to the submittal for concept review, these changes will not take effect until the Common Council adopts the comprehensive plan amendments, which requires a public process, including a public hearing with a 30-day required notice. The city does have a process by which private parties can request an amendment to the flu map. There's a $200 application fee, but in this case of this amendment, which is already being considered as part of a larger comprehensive plan amendment, staff recommends that this change continued to be considered under the current process rather than requesting the developer to submit a flu map application separately. The developer would still be required to apply for a rezoning and pay the associated fees. This rezoning process, should it move forward, would require a traffic impact analysis or TIA, as well as stormwater management plan approval, as is required for all zoning map amendments. I'm just providing that as a little bit of context because we've already received quite a few written comments about this project. And many of the questions that are being requested by members of the community, we cannot answer at this point because this is just an initial concept application. The developer is here and would like to make a presentation.
I'm Brian Hennig with Gallatin Real Estate. This is John Kemen, also with Gallatin Real Estate. We're working closely with the owners here of 2159 Allen Boulevard. It's been the family a long time. And I think we are excited to hear some feedback on the concept we come up with.
We should have JLA on the line as well. I think Joe Lee's going to put on a presentation, but just to piggyback on what Brian said, this has been in the family for 40 plus years. Private use for soccer fields. It is a beautiful site on Allen Boulevard that we see a great opportunity to bring more people to utilize the amenities of the parks in the neighboring areas, and the public transport is a huge benefit. So we look forward to getting some feedback so we can address our plan and move forward. I don't know if Joe's on.
Is Joe on?
Yep, I'm here, guys. Thanks. Abby and Daphne, can I share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to share your screen now, Joe.
Before you get started, Joe, can
Yeah.
I ask from members from the audience, are you able to hear Joe? No? I'm going to see if I can turn up the volume over here and if that will help a little bit.
I'll try to speak up as well.
Can you hear him okay?
All right.
Hold on one second, Joe.
Okay.
Yeah, she's got Can you ask Joe to speak?
Joe, can you say something again so we can test the sound in here?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. we can.
Awesome. All right. So I can proceed?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for having us tonight. Like the other applicants today, we're really excited about this project and the investment in City of Middleton. As other applicants have said, it's just a great place where it's drawing a lot of people that want to live here. This project, as Abby described, is a mixed-use project on this entire block bounded by Mendota, Middleton Beach Road, and Allen Boulevard on the west. We are also proposing a new private drive on the south side of the property, completely on this part of land. We'll get to that in a minute. The goals of this project is to develop a high quality mixed use project with sufficient density to allow that quality mix of uses. And we'll get into some images of the type of environment we want to create, that that retail, lively retail environment on Allen Boulevard. When we look at this site, obviously we have to address the context, and what we're doing here is placing the density on the western part of the site and leaving the eastern part of the site natural to accommodate some stormwater management and some natural amenities, and provide a natural landscape buffer to the existing development to the east of the site on the lake. What that also does is create some nice linkages to the within the development and outside of the development with the existing Lakeview Park to the north, the open space directly to the north of Mendota, and then all the way down to the boat launch south of us. So we've got some really nice linkages that will also be an amenity to not only the residents here, but Middleton as a whole. So what we have here is two buildings. One's labeled the A building on the north on Mendota, and then one's labeled the B building on the south side of the site. The A building is a 7-level building with 2 levels of parking and 5 levels of multifamily and commercial above that parking. We have the commercial space, about 7,000 square feet of retail commercial at the ground floor along Allen Boulevard. And then, as Abby mentioned, along Mendota, we are proposing some units. The grade drops quite a bit from Allen down to Middleton Beach Road, and we're proposing to make up that grade and to screen some parking with the use of residential units that would be a walk up and would really present themselves to Mendota Avenue. We do have a surface parking lot that we've brought in off the street as to create a nice pedestrian friendly, pedestrian friendly Allen Boulevard. This parking lot in the center of the buildings would serve the retail uses that are in the buildings. Building B would also have roughly 6,000 square feet of commercial retail on the ground floor on the Allen Boulevard side. And then we're using that same strategy of fronting this new private drive with the units that create a nice streetscape on the south side of the development. On the east side, you see we have a large open space that we have dedicated for some green space, some stormwater management, some walking paths. That's really going to be a nice, we'll have some images later on here that will show you the type of environment we wish to create here. But it's going to be a great amenity for the site, not only for the residents that will live here, but for the community and the neighborhood at large. And the other thing we should mention is that we've organized the site and designed the buildings as such that the short ends of the buildings and not the long faces of the buildings are facing east, not only to present a more appealing massing to the east side of the site, but also to open up the views towards the lake from both those buildings. So that's the general site development. What I'm going to show next are some precedent imagery of what we intend to create, the environment we intend to create along Allen Boulevard with the mix of uses of both residential and commercial. So again, there's a lot of design that's left to go on this, as this is just a conceptual presentation. But when we're looking at what types of environments we want to create along Allen, this is what we're thinking. You know, real active spaces on these ground floor retail. There'd be a little bit higher bay ceilings, and just to activate the street with a mix of uses, which have yet to be determined. And then, of course, to help support those and those uses, we'd also have the multifamily residential above. So real high quality, activating the streets, creating a nice streetscape, indoor, outdoor connections, places where people, we want to create a positive identity where people will want to come and hang out. Here's some more examples of that, really activating the street here. A lot of glass on the ground floor for the indoor-outdoor connection. Street side cafe look, some outdoor seating, that kind of thing. So as we progress the design of this project, you'll see more detail of how we will accomplish that specifically. But as a precedent and as inspiration, these are the types of environments we're looking towards as we proceed on with the design. As we look to the east of the site, we really wanted to show specifically what we were thinking as far as what the massing, what the spatial character of this eastern portion of the site would result in. And I don't want to get focused on the architecture itself, the design that really we're, as the other applicant said, we're in its infancy. We do know we want to pursue a more traditional architectural style, even more traditional than what these might reflect. But what's important here is the massing and the scale and how we're keeping the density back to the west and creating this great natural outdoor space that serves as amenity and a buffer to the existing development to the east. So in the foreground, you can see that open space with the walking paths and the connections from the north to the south. This is a view looking on the southeast corner, looking north. And you can see then how the buildings massing would present themselves with this short ends of the buildings facing that natural amenity. Another view of that, this is at the northeast corner looking south, looking southwest. So again, a really intriguing and really inviting natural amenity for the site. And then one more kind of mid-block that shows we'll have some sort of open air structure as a gathering place, perhaps, and an amenity, an additional amenity for the eastern part of the site. And that is, I have additional, we have the rest of the slides for the full submittal, but this is the abbreviated concept submittal, and we're open to take questions and comments.
Does anyone from the commission have any comments?
I just have a comment that it's just about 7.
Yes.
To the public hearing.
We can come back to it, is my understanding.
Yes, we can
Thank
open
you.
it later. We just can't open it before 7.
Okay.
Thank you for keeping me on track. As for these two buildings, any discussion? Jump right in.
I'll jump in. This site, because it's been kind of used as open space, active open space for so long. I think it's a bit hard to get our arms around, at least me personally, get my arms around the development of it at this extent. That being said, I think we have, some responsibility to develop this site in a responsible manner. And I think that means putting some more housing units on it, certainly pushing the density towards Allen Boulevard. I thought the idea of us having some missing middle housing towards Middleton Beach Road would be a good transition, so that it wouldn't feel like this was the multifamily, the taller multifamily mixed use buildings were really right on top of the single family there along the lake, but there could be a transition to that. I think that would, in my mind, would help out quite a bit. In terms of just some practical aspects of the proposal, I'd like to see if the development team could align the entrance into the development with Lakeview Boulevard, so that there was a boulevard cut there, so we'd have traffic that could enter into the site from either northbound or southbound traffic from Allen Boulevard. And think about ways of handling the parking needs for the retail spaces. If we want those retail spaces to be successful, we've got to have some convenient parking that's going to be available to them. And hopefully we don't pave more of the site to do that. I think you've got a lot of structured parking, and if we can figure out a way to share some of that parking so that it's usable with retail spaces, I think that would be a positive. Mr. Lee talked about the commercial spaces having some additional headroom perhaps, and I think that would be important. I don't know if those are 2-story spaces or two typical 2 parking level spaces, but that I think having something that's got 16 to 20 foot of ceiling height there would make that more attractive for more attractive uses, restaurant uses, or more flexibility. So I hope that you can incorporate that. That's it for now.
Thanks for the comments.
I'd like to clarify that missing middle on Mendota, which I'm excited about. These are all rentals though, correct?
Correct.
So it's not rent to own or home ownership
Correct.
option. Okay, thank you.
Even the townhouses?
The townhouse is a 2-level residential that they're explaining. It's built into the residential units, and they would be rentals.
Alder Hanira?
Just zooming in to look at the frontage on Allen Boulevard. I'm looking at the one that's got the staff comments on it, and it says show as path instead of sidewalk. So you're aware there is a multi-purpose path that go, and that absolutely has to be
Correct.
preserved.
Yep.
And I would say this, if this development goes forward, this would be an opportunity to build in some good pedestrian and bicycling infrastructure, such as raised crosswalks, so that you're calling the driver's attention as they're about to pull out, calling their attention to the fact that they have to watch for cars and bikes and pedestrians. We don't have that yet along this road for any of the intersections. So I think that would be important to have. This is early, but I don't know if you were in the room when I mentioned Middleton's 2050 target of getting to 100% renewable energy, clean renewable energy. And I would encourage you to find ways to build that goal into your design, and also, eliminate any plans for electric appliances. I think this development.
Just clarify your gas appliances, eliminate plans for gas appliances.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
no
go
problem.
with electric, not gas. I do have some concerns about the stormwater management feature on the image that's showing on the screen. It looks like an actual pond. But on your drawings, it doesn't look like that. It looks more green space. Can you?
Yeah, we're
clarify
very
that?
early in just overall design. And that is one feature that's still very early in design. Soil borings were just completed this past week. So we have to get a sense of what the soil conditions are, where, to really dig into designing that stormwater management system.
And we have challenged our civil engineering team with how can we make that look more like a lake and have water in there consistently rather than some seasons when it's dry, it stays dry and looks overgrown and dry, like not very appealing. So we're going to explore opportunities that how can we keep at least a section of it wet constantly and then have a dry section that accommodates for larger storm events.
Yeah, and the overall intention for that backside of the site currently is a park-like feel to, connect well with everything that's adjacent to the site.
Yeah, thank you for always asking your environmental things, so you will not be surprised later. And thank you for taking those. Any comments?
Yeah, sure. I'll share some comments since it's just design review. My first thought when you showed sort of the elevation from the southwest corner was that it felt a lot like the northwestern campus. And I was pleasantly surprised at the thoughtfulness of the layout as a resident of a current single family home would be viewing the property. They would see something more park-like and then a smaller footprint. I think that there's an environmental challenge here with the fact that this is a large area that was absorbing rain events and buffering the lake and the community and Allen Boulevard from flooding events. And so that I think will need a very close look, more than other sites would need just to handle their own stormwater. So as a fairly pedestrian friendly family, we sometimes walk or bike along Allen Boulevard, and there's a hill going down this direction that people sort of tear down at about 45, 50 miles per hour. And, from the overview, it doesn't look like there's that much setback. When I look at your plans of your avenue mixed use kind of concept, this reminds me of downtown areas built for a pedestrian friendly avenue mixed use purpose. Allen Boulevard is not that. And I think that to make that successful, and I'd love it to be more successful because this is the kind of community I want to live in. This is the kind of community we should be encouraging development of. But to be successful on Allen Boulevard, I think you'll need to put a little bit more thought into buffering that street. And the idea of having the parking inlet and outlet line up with, is that Lake Street there?
Lakeview.
Lakeview.
Yeah.
That could encourage the possibility of getting a street light there, a metered street light, which would really improve Allen Boulevard in general and the happiness of all of the residents, I think. So these are things that I think should be looked at. I do wish that there was an affordable aspect to this. This doesn't look affordable in any way. It looks gorgeous, but not affordable. So those are just my initial thoughts.
Thank you.
My first thoughts were height. I know that the Middleton Shores development, there's the height of that building was kind of contentious. Same with the apartment that's currently under construction where former Captain Bill's is located. How does that fit into this area of Middleton? You have single family homes to the east, single family homes to the west, parkland northwest, parkland south, conservancy lands north. How does it fit with the overall aesthetic of the community itself? Now, that being said, I think density is very important as well. This is Allen Boulevard is now served by Route F on the bus route. That is a bus that's very easy to get to downtown Madison. I mean, people get on the bus here will be downtown Madison less than 20 minutes. And that's a very, very important thing. Also, they can be at Metro Market in 5 minutes, right? Again, a very, very important thing. So I think density is, important, but my gut instinct was 6 stories, and I'm not exactly 100% supportive of 7 stories just to the north of that. And, how is this going to fit in with the overall community? The next part, I kind of feel like, you said this is all going to be renter occupied. We are missing a portion of owner occupied homes in this city, in this community. That missing middle, right? We just went through a home purchase and a home sale. Okay. We've been looking at the real estate market in Middleton for a couple of years, looking for a new home. Finding a home in this community, finding someplace to live that you would like to own yourself for under $400,000 is basically impossible. Okay. I do know we have 2 new developments going on over the next few years up in the northwest side of the community, which there will be some of those opportunities for people to purchase those homes. But what's really truly missing is that, $200,000 to $400,000 home in Middleton. And this is a very large piece of land. I don't know how much, I look at a lot of the other developments that have gone on, a lot of the infill development, you obviously are probably not going to put owner occupied homes in those places. But I've seen in this community, I think about the place up by Orchids, up by North Lake, the Orchid. Yeah, Orchid Acres. Yeah. And, that was a very small piece of land that ended up being single family homes. I don't know what size, how that compared to this, but the fact that it can be done, I feel like that's missing an opportunity here. I'm not saying single family homes in this site, but some sort of owner occupied home or place for people to, get into the city, and establish themselves in the community. Go to the schools here, join commissions, really establish themselves in Middleton. It's really hard to enter as a young family in this city. And I would really love to see that at some point. If you have the townhome site on the east, eastern portion, that would be a good place possibly for an opportunity for someone to purchase a townhome as opposed to, renting for their lives. And I think that, I see a lot of people who are my peers and younger, really struggle to find homes to buy in this area. And we have to take opportunities when they present themselves to provide this type of housing for people to purchase, get in, and then, eventually potentially sell them and upgrade, and then keep people in the community. Because, I've experienced it myself and other people experience it. It's hard to own a home right now. It's hard to find a home right now. And I think we kind of need to explore options when we have an opportunity like this for some sort of ownership.
I want to second that thought process. I think that's spot on. This site is a large site, obviously, and I don't think one building solution is necessarily the answer. I think having a mixed use component up on Allen Boulevard, and then having some lower scale, perhaps owner occupied, if that can work out, housing along Middleton Beach Road that would provide a scale that would better integrate into the surrounding neighborhood, I think would be very helpful. As far as the building height at 6 stories, I struggle with that. I mean, because across the street, we're not going to have structures anywhere near that. So I don't know what the answer is, but I don't know that it's 6 stories. I think that we're really kind of pushing the limits of what is compatible with the neighborhood.
I feel similarly on some of those items, but I think it's unrealistic to expect that this lot across from the lake would ever be affordable, missing middle housing. I just think that this land in Middleton at this point in time and moving forward will always be higher end. It's so close to the lake.
Staff, yes.
I guess I have a question too. We haven't really had a chance to talk about this project much since it's at the concept level. How much is the building height motivated by lake views?
Part of the building height is motivated by the parking because of the location of the site. At grade, kind of carving into the topography at Allen Boulevard. Sorry. Part of the height is the parking requirements going underground at that
Right.
lot. It's going to be challenging and difficult. And to meet the parking requirements for those apartments, we had to get 2 floors of parking and 5 stories above that. So just that ratio that we hit kind of at that point. And then topography of the site.
But I mean, at what level can you see the lake from these? Would it be like the 2nd or 3rd level of the residences or?
Well, there's tall trees on the east side of portion of the lakes that are probably 45 to 50 feet tall. I think once you get up to, you can see the leaves aren't there. At the amenity deck, you'll be able to see the water levels 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, you'll have a pretty good like view. They're still obstructed by 3-story homes along the way with these mature trees. Stories you're above those, and you're set back 200 from Middleton Beach Road, so it's
Thanks.
All right, I have a question. With some of the pictures from the east side of your buildings where there's the 4 showing, it seems like it's a vast green space. And I'm trying to figure out how much width is that example is that pond in B1, between the end of your building and say Middleton Beach Road. Is that 40 feet, 80 feet? Like I'm trying to have an understanding of best estimate.
Let me see if I'm understanding the question. What's the distance between the building and Middleton Beach Road?
Yes, because
Okay.
what I'm trying to understand is if you're proposing a 6-story building,
Yep.
I understand you have landscape and it looks really far away when people are walking on the walking path, but I'm trying to have an understanding if that's 20, 30 feet, is that
Sure.
80?
Yep, okay. At the northernmost portion of the site where the building A is, yeah, right there, Abby or Daphne. That's 70 feet from the building to the property line.
Okay.
And then on the southern most part, it's 225 feet. So it's pretty substantial. And, we thought, the thinking with that is that the green space and open amenity is a great neighbor to the existing development to the east versus, putting up more housing right across the street. So we really did want to develop the site very deliberately like this to provide that open space.
Okay. I just want to echo what others in the room said, that the height is a challenge. 6 stories, that most of the things on the Allen Boulevard, what I kind of call the bottoms, because if you're on high ground and it's rock solid on Century and University, they can take some more height. I'm not a geologist or a hydrologist, but if there's anyone in the room that can help a lady out, helps me. But the soils on this field just are rough. And I just know that from even the road when we reconstructed last year, when they got to digging, they were surprised and they had to take different tacks, to have an effective road. And we weren't digging that deep. The creek, I lovingly call it a creek, but some call it a ditch north of this area. It is completely dry and it's only about 6 inches down right now. It's usually very full. I thought it was 18 inches, 24 inches deep. Shockingly, in a drought, I'm finding out it's a mere few inches. So the reason I'm sharing that is that the waters come rushing down from what I call the bowl of the rest of the city. And I'm sure you'll have wonderful conversations with stormwater in the weeks and months to come, and water resources. The reason I'm sharing this is in the 2018 flood, the vehicles on Allen, right there in front of where your A building would be, A1, were flipped around the next morning. So in what I've deconstructed is that water came rushing down and came across those 18 houses, across the fields, straight towards them. So when you build these buildings, you're going to be creating, instead of having it 18 houses wide coming towards the lake at a future water event, it's going to be rivers and the volume will be higher. So make sure when you're building, you got to keep this in mind. And we have to be good neighbors because that water event was harsh. And we were digging out a year and a half later at the creek corridor, which is not your problem. You're not your problem. But the fact that it was so much going on in that time is kind of why I assume we have a large turnout today. And so 2018 isn't your fault. 2018 hopefully won't repeat itself, but it's something very close to our hearts, especially in this land area. So make sure that when you're trying to build your 1-story underground, that it can handle that. And I understand there's advanced techniques, but we make sure we're doing that right. And that the volume of 6 stories, which is very high. So the senior apartments down the way are 4 stories, maybe 4.5. And the other thing that I want you to think about is some version of a transitional area, maybe a step back. I'm looking at the Commissioner Hermans because she always talks about step back, or someone does. So that when those single family homes are looking, it doesn't feel like, even if you're at 4 stories, whatever that is, so that we have what feels like a community. So, and if I misspoke, I apologize. Oh, Commissioner Bruce, my apologies. Thank you so much. Any other comments? Okay. So again, take your time in thinking through these issues. You have a room full of people looking for your leadership. And with
Thank you for
that,
your-
can we move on?
Thank you for your time and comments.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the public hearing. 7 o'clock, which is now 7:23. Request for rezoning from Plan Development District, PDD, Specific Implementation Plan, SIP, to PDD, General Implementation Plan. Please keep it down while you're exiting. Thank you. Greenway Mixed Use Development, 8309 and 8313 Greenway Boulevard. I'm opening the public hearing. Seeing no comments.
Do we receive any comments from public staff?
Is there anyone online?
There is no one online and we did not receive any written comments in advance.
All right, hearing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, moving on to appointment to Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Transit Committee. I'm going to go ahead and ask staff to provide some feedback, but I believe it's to the pedestrian bicycle transit committee from this committee. Is that accurate?
Yes, the Plan Commission is responsible for designating a representative of your commission to serve on this committee. Dan Ramsey had previously served in this role. He was also previously the chair of the committee. And so our recommendation is for this commission to appoint a representative to serve on the committee for the next year. Mark staffs the committee. When do they meet? When?
Way to sell it.
Is it the second Thursday of the month at
At 5.
5 p.m.?
Is there anyone interested in nominating themselves?
Is Aaron,
Aaron
He's not in the room. Let's nominate Aaron.
no, if Aaron would like it, or if anyone else in the room would like it, I would happily nominate someone. If,
Sorry, Aaron is already nominated for 2 others, so I don't think
then
I
I
can
would,
handle another one.
I would welcome one of my colleagues to nominate me. I'm
I
taking,
nominate you.
thank you. I was gonna say, I was gonna sell it by saying I'm taking Dan Ramsey's place as the alder on the Plan Commission, and I'm on Public Works, so
It makes
It's
sense.
good.
it's fate.
And you're a detail person, and that's really important with transit. Really important.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of recommending Alder Haniro as the appointment to the Pedestrian Bicycle Transit Committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. It passes unanimously. Moving on to the appointment to Workforce Housing Committee. Do I have a nomination?
Mayor, I have sat on the Workforce Housing Committee previously, and it is something that I'm interested in. So if there's no one else that would be interested, I would be happy to staff that.
I nominate Commissioner Bruce.
I second it.
Excellent. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of nominating Commissioner Bruce to the appointment to Workforce Housing Committee from the Plan Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none.
It's okay. We'll just have the minutes reflect that you're appointing him as the representative
Yes.
instead of,
She did work appointing in there.
pardon me?
She did work
Okay.
that into the.
Okay, I just to clean it, I'll just say to appoint Bruce to this as the representative.
Excellent.
Okay, is that okay?
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to make sure the language was the way you wanted it.
Thank you. Do they still vote on it?
I didn't interrupt, I'm sorry.
It's okay. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously, and thank you, staff. I really appreciate it, Mark. All right, so moving on, I think I have the request for rezoning from Plan Development District Specific Implementation Plan to PDD General Implementation Plan, Greenway Mixed Use Development 8309 and 8313 Greenway Boulevard. Do I have a motion, or does staff want to give some feedback?
Yeah, so we just have 2 updates to our motion from, the last meeting and the last meeting. And it's 5 and 6 on your screen. And so it's, the project will also include solar EV charging infrastructure and bike parking. And also that the applicant will support the city assigning mixed use urban or, something equivalent at the time the city adopts its new zoning map with the zoning rewrite. So those are just 2 contingencies staff wanted to add to the motion if, the commission votes to approve. Oh, and I believe Joe Lee is also here to, speak on the project. for this project as well. And Joe, if you want to go through your presentation again or anything, yeah, feel free.
Sure. Steve Dorn's here as well.
Okay.
Steve, did you want to say anything first, or you want me to just run through?
No, if you want to just run through, that would be great.
Does the plan commission want to hear the presentation, or do you feel like you know enough about the project that you want to discuss it?
Well,
I thought we had come close to some conclusions at the last meeting before we realized that we couldn't take action. I'm comfortable with the information that we've had to date and could move forward.
I agree. Yeah, I think the only reason we didn't advance this at the meeting when this first came up is because of the problem with the noticing. I would like to break the our motion into two separate ones. So I'll move that we recommend that the common council approve an ordinance rezoning the property to PDD GIP for this property at 8309 and 8313 Greenway Boulevard.
With the recommendations?
The actual GIP, I was going to do separately. But do they need to be, you think, because it's two separate recommendations in the staff recommendation.
So the motion on the screen is, so you're breaking apart the motion that is on the screen. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's what I.
And you're taking the GIP away from the PDD?
I'm doing this, we don't have to do it this way. I just know that whenever we make any minor change to something, for Robert's rules, we have to go back and vote on amendments and things. So I was going to do the zoning first and then approving the GIP with the contingencies, but I'm happy to.
I think keeping them.
I don't know if they can do that.
I see no harm. I think it makes sense to keep them together because the rezoning ordinance that the council adopts is linked to the language as approved by the plan commission. And so having this adopted as one motion as is suggested on the screen, I'm not sure what is gained by separating them, and I'm not sure if that's helpful.
Okay.
But if you have another way of looking at it, I'm happy to hear the rationale, but I'm not sure what are you trying to accomplish?
I was just trying to take one piece at a time, but if we can combine the two, then my motion dies for lack of a second. So I'll move to recommend that council approve an ordinance rezoning the property to PDD GIP and approve the GIP with the following contingencies, all 6 of them as listed in the packet.
Do I have a second?
Harple second.
Any discussion?
Is it correct that rezoning to PDD is contingent on the GIP? Like if the GIP weren't approved, the PDD would also kind of go away. It's not rezoning to something that somebody else could use, right? So these are kind of tied together. Okay.
I see what Alder Haniro was raising earlier. But I mean, the two of them are inextricably linked together. So maybe the way this is phrased, which I think is how I've phrased my recommendations before as well, maybe we can improve upon that. But I don't see any harm in having it be this way because ultimately the council links these 6 conditions with the rezoning ordinance. I mean, that's the effect of what you're doing.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure if I answered your question, Gretchen, but and just for the minute taking, are we reflecting the fact there was just this one motion made? Because I never heard the mayor say that there was a motion that died for lack of a second. So
I can say that for you.
what's that?
I can say it for
Okay,
you.
all right. I just wanted to know how you want me to document it. So,
I appreciate
okay.
that. All right, so can you help refresh me on where we're at?
We have, I moved and Commissioner Herb seconded.
Excellent. Were we at the discussion point?
Yes.
Okay, hearing none others, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And moving on to the last item, zoning ordinance rewrite project, discussion direction regarding key policy. Are we still on that? Sorry. That added item yesterday, it kind of took up a lot of my time. So I have that. Let's see here a second. Right, project. All right, I have it marked from the last time. So give me a second. Because we didn't have our meeting 2 weeks ago.
Right, and we had this, we terminated our meeting early because everybody,
Tech issues.
well, no, we had lost steam. This, I'm talking about when we first discussed the zoning.
Very good.
Right.
All right, so staff, can you please share some insights?
Sure. So in May, you reviewed part one, the policy, the major policy items that had been flagged by the work group and our consultant. You reviewed those in May, and now this is part two. And actually, if it's helpful to you, I'm going to pass out. Thank you. But what Abby's handing out is the translation table, which was in your packet, but also I've added the definitions for each zoning classification, just in case in case you have questions about what they each stand for, and it comes up during the discussion. So the first item in part two is vehicle parking requirements. We, for many years, have had a separate document that was called our off-street parking landscape parking and landscaping specifications. And I don't know why it was adopted as a separate document, an adjunct to the zoning code, but we are finally combining them together now in part two of the zoning code. So the original, what's on the books right now was pretty generous with how much parking was required. And so we are proposing a significant an increase in, or a decrease in the minimum parking, I guess is the way to put it, and capping a maximum in many situations depending on the land use. So in green is the proposed is to have commercial and office uses at one stall per 500 square feet. And all maximums be 125% of the minimum. And that the three zoning districts listed, which are mixed use neighborhood, mixed use avenue, and mixed use downtown, would have a provision in which the minimum parking standards may be reduced by the Plan Commission up to 50%. And so that is what's proposed based on the work group response to the original template from our consultant. So we just wanted to make sure that you are comfortable with that. Or we release the ordinance.
Mark, we're approving, aren't we approving some multifamily developments with less than 1-to-1 parking already?
We have been, and that's a very good point. The new code proposes minimum 1 per unit, maximum 2 to 2.5 per unit. So the new code does reflect that. That's in the second bullet shown here. Maybe you can,
okay. I would be supportive of reducing that or even eliminating a parking requirement.
Eliminating a parking requirement for multifamily. One thing that Abby
or reducing it to, I mean, we're approving projects at 0.9 or so. I mean, taking it down to, I think the market's going to dictate what needs to happen, and as land gets more and more valuable, it's going to be tougher and tougher to incorporate parking and afford to incorporate the parking. So I think we need to be giving them flexibility to find solutions.
I mean, maybe a solution is So this second part in green is the MUN, MUA, MUD. Plan commission can reduce it to 50. Maybe we can just put it for, all multifamily.
Yeah.
Because they still have to be reviewed by plan commission through design review.
I think that would be
So-
reasonable.
So how would it be reworded?
So instead of just those three, it could be, all multifamily and multi-use or mixed use. Is that what you were thinking?
That's what I was thinking.
One thing that we discussed at the staff level today, just as an idea, is it'd be nice to link an incentive to providing transit passes, for example, for a development. So instead of having a whole level of parking, not to pick on any one project in particular, we'll just say project A. Parking spaces are, what are they, $30,000 a structured space? That's what I heard a few years ago as an average. But imagine, that could pay for a lot of bus passes for a long period of time. And, finding a way to, whether to provide that as an incentive or simply, as you're saying, Randy, just reduce the requirement, and maybe that would happen naturally by market.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The side benefit of doing that, of course, also is that then you get more transit ridership, and that leads to better transit service. It's a self-fulfilling.
What about the suggestions that you suggested possibly eliminating requirements
For
for
multifamily.
multi-family?
I'm okay with that because I think that the market will take care of itself. The developer isn't going to propose housing that he can't rent because there's not enough parking or there's no alternatives to a car. So I don't.
I think it's
a little bit out there, but I'd be okay with it.
I think it's important just from a staff standpoint. From what we've seen over the years, we have also heard a lot of neighborhood concerns. For example, with the Kestrel project, when there isn't enough parking provided, then the concern is that it will spill over into the neighborhood streets. So that's why finding that balance is important, and linking it with alternatives like transit.
I think it's important that we still have a requirement for ADA parking, though.
For what?
ADA parking. I think we need to keep that. I don't think that's negotiable,
Well, yeah, I
especially in a
think-
community where the transit and services are so sparse and will be for a long time. If we're counting on market pressure from not building enough parking with our units to create a demand pull situation that more walkable businesses are nearby residents, and that the whole Metro Transit will accommodate that. I think that's a really big ask right now. That's going to be decades away for that. And so we really need to make sure that the people that need transportation have access at their door. It's not like we have a fabulous bus service and that our weather is always pleasant. So we don't even have a medical clinic in Middleton.
It's fair. So does that meet your standards?
It's very helpful feedback. It shows that the work group, informal group that we had, the discussions, we actually didn't go far enough. So I'll discuss this with Abby and Daphne and our consultant, and we can see what else we can come up with for language. Is this something you would like to see again in 2 weeks? Or just have us work on it and incorporate it into the draft? And okay.
I feel comfortable with that.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to bicycle parking requirements. It's a hot topic in the city. I love it. I've been hearing I need more of these little things that people, I'll let you decide and share with what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, our current zoning code has never addressed the issue of bicycle parking. And through PDD, we have been imposing or conditioning approval of PDDs with provision of bicycle parking, especially for multifamily units but we've done it also with some larger commercial projects. So what we are proposing now is a required minimums for nearly all land uses outside of single family and two family zoning classifications, and to differentiate them based on short-term use, for example, from customers or visitors versus long-term parking situations for multifamily tenants. I don't really anticipate that anybody here would have a concern with that, but we wanted to highlight that as a policy change that we are recommending. And I developed a table with our consultant to, which you'll see when the draft is released in a few weeks. That links it to, oh, are you going to show?
No, no.
Oh, you're not, okay. So anyway, so I'm hearing thumbs up on that. Yeah. Number 3, outdoor recreational space for multifamily. As Abby mentioned earlier, and as several of you know, we had some discussion about this over the last few years. Our former mayor championed this cause as well. And we are proposing that there be on-site recreational space required with all new multifamily and mixed-use land uses, which can include specified indoor or outdoor spaces at a minimum of 200 square feet plus 25 square feet per bedroom. In the mixed use downtown and mixed use avenue zoning districts, a 50% reduction of the standards may be applied by the planning commission, which is similar language you saw previously for parking. So again, just wanted to flag that this was very much in keeping with the discussion you had regarding the Greenway Foundry discussion earlier. Any feedback on that?
Go ahead.
The 225 square feet essentially per 1 bedroom or 250 square feet for 2 bedroom. If you multiply that out over a project of 100 units, you're looking at like a half acre of ground.
Yeah.
So I think it's, unless we are able to use balconies and porches, private balconies, porches and other things to help satisfy that requirement, I think we're going to be limiting our densities more than what we'd like.
So you're saying that maybe the requirement's a little high, or what we need to do is, once you have a certain number of units, that you have a sliding scale, if you will, where you reduce the.
Or we, I thought the way I read it, it seemed like it had to be public use spaces, whereas you reference Madison, which they will allow private porches, balconies, and rooftop spaces as well to satisfy their open space requirement. And I think that would be, I think that's reasonable. I've dealt with that before, and that seems to work.
Okay.
I would like clarification. So the minimum of 200 square feet plus 25 square feet per bedroom, that's 200 plus, in parentheses, 25 times the number of bedrooms, correct? Okay, so it isn't 225 square feet for a 1 bedroom, 250 for a 2 bedroom.
Yeah, so the base is 200, and then, if they have 50 units at 2 bedrooms, then it's 25 times 100, because that's 200 bedrooms. So yeah, as Randy was saying, it can get really large really quick. Yeah.
Well, but it would get larger faster if that 200 were per bedroom. Okay, so just make sure that formula is clear.
Yeah. I was like, how are they gonna?
I don't like the idea of allowing private balconies. I mean, to me, the whole thing is to provide some sort of social infrastructure. And I think that's important to make sure we're getting at. I wondered why it's a straight 50% reduction. Did you mean up to a 50% reduction?
A reduction. I think that's the way Ben meant to write it. Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I would.
Could you have half of it inside and half of it outside?
Yeah.
As long as it adds up to the total.
If we're not using the the private balconies and porches. I agree with you. We need public spaces. A typical balcony is 60 square feet, 75 square feet. So there's still a requirement on top of that for some public space. If we're not going to include private spaces, then I think we got to look at that number again and test it out against some of the stuff that we've been doing.
I like the idea of applying this formula to some of the developments we just talked about, or, that have already been approved.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. If the rooftop is public, would you accept it? And I'm only asking because when I lived in Chicago, the building across from us had a public rooftop, like halfway up, like it had a halfway, and you could walk around. So if it was public and not private, would you be open to that?
If by public, you mean anyone in the building can access it?
No, it was a enter.
Oh, from the
So-
street?
Yeah, because you could wand to your floor and then you could take the public. I'm not saying anyone has to do this.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is that if it's 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and there's no space left, and someone wants to consider that, you don't have to answer, but just a thought, because we're assuming that that was a private rooftop. I think there's one like that in Madison. They have a public. Been to the events a few times, and it's the same thing. If you want to get to a floor, you have to have a wand, and then you can go to the rooftop.
Yeah, like the Enovino bar
was just gonna
downtown.
say that
Yeah,
too.
they have a separate elevator that goes straight to the roof. And so it's like part of a hotel. So like all the hotel residents can, have a key card that goes. But yeah, because I think when we think of mixed use, we usually think of it on the first floor, but in downtown areas a lot, they have them on, the rooftops and stuff. Yeah.
I have a question. So this is titled outdoor recreational space for multifamily, but then it goes on to say it could be specified indoor or outdoor spaces. And so I just want to make sure we understand what it's going to be, because an indoor community space is a lot different than outdoor recreational space. So I guess when it comes back to us in the form of a draft, make
I
sure
will
it's
clarify that.
consistent.
I'll do what I did last time, which is respond. We'll digest the comments and write them up and get you responses to anything that was outstanding.
Okay.
And how we
Thank you.
propose to address it.
Thank you for catching that. Number 4, single family and 2-family design standards.
Yeah, this was something that we looked at the model ordinance that the consultant gave us and decided it was going too far. And so we basically said, we don't want to apply all these standards, have these all be applicable. The black text shows you the questions that were asked, and the work group's response are in red, feeling that they are too restrictive and should be eliminated. Most of them should be eliminated or reduced to best fit Middleton. So that as a result, we took that out. It's no longer applicable to single family and 2-family land use design requirements. And this had to do with requirements for windows, doors, additions, exterior materials, building orientation, porches, decks, patios, etc. But we kept in a provision regarding the front facade for front loaded garages. So you haven't seen the ordinance, obviously, but it just came across as a bit too much for our work group. So, okay. It sounds like that's fine with you guys. You all, I guess we should be saying. Other land use design standards, number 5. This was generally supported by the work group with some minor adjustments as shown in red. And actually I'm gonna, this and the next one, I'm gonna ask Daphne to also comment on this, but we basically are linking this to our historic district overlay for downtown. and the design requirements are reflected in multifamily, commercial, mixed use and industrial land uses that reflect these changes that the work group suggested. What we are proposing in our ordinance is very similar to what Madison has, and no changes have been made beyond we're going to be presenting what largely is a common standard for the area. So it's not really a policy change. It's a policy change for our current practice, but it's not really a controversial issue, I guess. So the number 6 special area design standards downtown overlay. Again, the work group was comfortable with the concepts that the model ordinance included. They would like to prohibit all first floor facades facing the street from having siding. Again, this is our downtown specifically zoning district. Would like to see the standard removed for new buildings having a maximum of 2 stories taller than the adjacent buildings. And then the step back standards, which are something that's still evolving based on the feedback you gave back in May. We are rethinking that a little bit. And Randy, you had put us, I think, on that track in May about looking at it based on distance. Yeah, exactly. I don't really have anything else. Did you want to say anything? Or
So for the downtown overlay, basically, I have like a little outline on our draft zoning map that's still like very much in flux. So we haven't shown it to anyone yet, but basically the thought behind, the downtown overlay for the historic, design is that basically if a building is next to a historic landmark building in downtown, which we do have, several, they would be included into this downtown overlay. So, if, the building next to Villa Dolce, if it, I believe it's called the Dufresne building. If that ever wants to redevelop, which we hope it never will, but, then it would be, it would have to adhere to all of these overlay. So that's kind of the thought behind the downtown overlay.
So the overlay isn't, it's associated with the adjacent landmark buildings. It's not a district itself. It's.
Yeah, I mean, our downtown is basically along Parmenter. So I believe, the 2-3 blocks of Parmenter in the downtown, every single building is adjacent to a historic building as well. So yeah, it's basically along there, and then a couple parcels along Hubbard and Elmwood, just because they're next to some historic buildings. Yeah.
Well, I think all of that would make Alder Schaefer very happy, who used to be on the Plan Commission. So I'm glad we're carrying that forward for him. All right, moving on to landscape standards.
Yeah, so landscape standards are currently linked with off-street parking standards in a separate document. They're now being integrated into our new code. We traditionally have looked at landscaping with respect to screening parking, and that's really been the focus of our code in the past. So what this new code will be proposing is different areas of the site, such as building foundation, paved areas, street frontage, and yards, and having some flexibility for how to address screening requirements. You can see in the 2 black bullet points, existing landscaping points, trees and shrubs, and then proposed actually a bigger range. The work group was supportive of the approach, wanted to emphasize that we promote shaded sidewalks through the standards. I do want to say that one of the things that the code is doing is having, for any parking area, we want to promote a 10-foot separation between off-street parking and the sidewalk, so that there's a real good buffer, instead of like what we have on University Avenue in some places where we just have no room for landscaping, or it's very feeble landscaping that doesn't take hold. So we really want to try and provide more effective screening of off-street parking areas. So there also is language regarding rain garden and bioswale standards, buffer yard standards, et cetera. I don't have to read all this, but also an emphasis on native plants. 50 must be made up of 50% native plants.
That's exciting.
They can only count for their baseline point value to satisfy the minimum standards up to 50%. Beyond that, they count for double. So it's an incentive. I've worked with our sustainability coordinator and Parks and Rec department to review this. And so I think they are excited about this. So hopefully you all like that when that comes out.
I'm excited about it as somebody who has native, my whole backyard is native plants now. So I love it. I love the idea of extending the conservancy into our residential areas and our commercial areas. I'm wondering about the point system, and only because I want to understand whether or not the points as they're proposed are really going to drive people towards what you want them to do. Does that make sense? I mean, again, I'm thinking about going through an example, not now, but to see how would the change in the point values that you're proposing, how would that drive people to do what you want them to do?
I think, were you about to say something? Oh, I thought I heard you. Because we are applying the points to more elements on a site, I think the idea is to have, so there'd be landscaping spread throughout the site more than just parking area screening. So I think it's a good idea that what you're proposing to take some existing site plans and look to see how that would, if that would change anything. I haven't looked at the landscaping point system for quite some time, so I'd be happy to go back and look at that and give you an example of that.
Okay.
So I can do that.
I appreciate that. And then what will the list of native plants be?
There's a long list. We don't have the code available on the screen right now, but it's a fully vetted, it's a long list. I'm happy to get you that.
Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure that, people can't say, well, clover is my native.
Yeah. And it's not, again, the idea is not
But
to,
I'm against clover.
the idea isn't to force people to do this, but to provide an incentive approach for this.
Yeah.
We also have tree species that are not going to be allowed listed.
That was my next question
Yeah.
is, do we have species of plants and trees and shrubs that we do not allow? Because I remember seeing a brochure from Friends of Pheasant Branch that had a particular grass, I forget which kind it was, and
Right.
realizing that several of my neighbors have that exact grass that the Friends encourage no one to grow, especially near the
Yeah.
conservancy.
And also diversity of planting, so we don't end up with the ash borer problem where
Mhm.
we have a monolithic culture of species that gets wiped out. So, soon this, and I want to emphasize the ordinance when it comes out, obviously all of it's on the table for discussion. None of the, none of this is decided. This is all just flagging for you and getting sort of your feedback before it's unveiled. So all of this is going to be up for discussion. I just want to, and obviously with public input with the hearing process. Two more items, appealing a conditional use permit decision. This has in the past, this doesn't happen very often, but the Plan Commission grants conditional use permits. That's the task here. When there is an appeal of a decision, whether it's an approval or a denial, it goes to the council. I think that's only happened a couple times in my time with the city, which is lengthy. And but our ordinance is going to be proposing that the Zoning Board of Appeals handle these conditional use permit appeals. And that was something that also was recommended by our city attorney. Let's see here. Well, he had weighed the pros and the cons. I'd forgotten that this was in here, the second paragraph. And then we've, in discussing this with the city attorney and with the work group, felt that the zoning board was an appropriate forum because they have the expertise in interpreting the zoning code. So, or in theory, we'll have that expertise. So this is a decision, obviously, that the council will have the opportunity to weigh in on as to whether they're comfortable with this approach, because obviously the zoning board is not made up of elected officials. So we'll be proposing that it's the zoning board, but I'd like your feedback on that at this time. If you have any thoughts on that.
I think council should have the decision.
You think council should?
I do. And because can council override the zoning board of appeals
No.
decisions? I feel like as elected officials, that's something that really should fall to council. And I trust the staff to present the background on anything that might come before council in such a way that council will make the right decision, even if we don't all have the expertise.
And I fully understand where you're coming from, having been in that seat as well in a couple different capacities. I didn't have I saw the pros and cons either way. So
Sure, I see him too. I just, I feel like this, it just seems like it should be something that
okay,
elected officials weigh in on.
I feel a little bit differently perhaps because this would be a third party looking at it with fresh eyes. And I think it takes the pressure off of the individuals that made those decisions initially. And it feels more final. Like if I were to appeal something and a completely different committee looked at it and that's what they do is zoning and they made a decision, I would feel like it was fair. But if the same people look at it again and make the same decision, I might feel that's unfair and then I might sue them as individuals.
But would it be the same people?
well, if it's the council, we have at least one representative, you, Alder Hanero, who would have a chance to vote on it twice. I think, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah. And the only other concern I have with the council having the final say is it becomes political rather than maybe a more unbiased approach.
Yeah.
That's more my thought.
Yeah.
I think that's why the work group had kind of steered it toward the ZBA. But I'm not that strong on it.
Sorry, we have an ice machine that makes howling noises.
It's awesome.
It's basically saying the time limit is up for the meeting.
I was
done.
thinking that, yeah.
So what
Okay.
is the attorney's recommendation?
It wasn't they didn't say you have to do one way or the other. That's a policy choice for the council ultimately. So I think what I'm hearing is sort of more people saying, let's keep it at the ZBA, but Alder Hanero, I'm sure will advocate if you feel differently at the council level. And that's something that can be easily changed, obviously, with the draft. So,
Well, we haven't heard from Chris and Nick either.
oh, okay.
I'm good with ZBA.
I was going by the nod.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can't see that.
Yeah, I think I am too. Good with ZBA.
I was neutral.
Okay. All right, thank you for your feedback. And the last one is vehicle access standards. This was just repeat, no, vehicle parking. Oh, that's right. Oh, yes. So this is, we've spent actually a lot of time on this and I've been trying to put it out of my head, I think. We have a lot of our standards that are in the template that Vanderwall uses. A lot of those have been in a policy document that was adopted by the Public Works Committee and ultimately the council back in 2006. They are not codified by ordinance. Our staff, engineering staff specifically, feels that that's been working well. The work group also felt that the policy-based approach for these standards has been effective. So rather than incorporating all what are in some cases very technical details into the zoning code, they are proposing that we just keep relying on our policy standards, our traffic, what's that called? The transportation network plan and access standards and the like. And we would reference those in the zoning code. The access management policy specifically, it's called. So again, not so much something that maybe you would have feedback on because it's an area that's very specialized, but the proposed ordinance is going to be about 250 pages long. And so I am happy to see anything that is kept, that's very detailed, that's not, it doesn't have to be in ordinance form to keep that in the current environment that we currently have. It is fine with me. Our city attorney hasn't really, I think he's comfortable with that as well. I'm still going through his comments specific to this and I haven't made it to that one yet, but I just want to flag it for you that this is a big topic that we've had, a discussion we've had, and I don't expect you to have really, I mean, unless you have a feeling on this sort of thing, but it like gets into how long a driveway, a private drive on a property is, how long it is before you can branch out into the parking lot, the throat length of it. It just gets into very detailed engineering stuff, which I'd rather not see in the zoning code. So I can't really give you good examples without releasing the code. So it's just something I'm flagging that has been a source of discussion. So it's something when we release the code, you might comment on. So I don't know why we're ending with that one, but
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So why does it make sense to take this or to keep this out? Don't we want developers or anyone to be able to find everything they need in the zoning
Yeah,
code? And if this is not part of it, if this is separated out, I would ask what other policies or guidance is separated out?
Yeah, well, first of all, this is how we've been working with this for almost 20 years, if not longer. And it's largely been effective, what I understand. The code would specifically refer to that standard and it would be cited. Public Works Committee can and does review the standards as necessary. I mean, these aren't things that change on a whim either. I do see, especially with our discussions with Bell Farm and raised crosswalks, for example, I see some of these things evolving where there's a new way of looking at some of these standards that are policy-based guidance from the council that are adopted as standards in the access management policy. It doesn't have to be something that we then officially have to go through the ordinance amendment process for the zoning code. It's something that can be handled by the council without having to amend the zoning ordinance as a formal hearing process. So did that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's benefit to keeping some of the very technical stuff out that's not applicable to the average, most people aren't. This pertains largely to commercial development and engineering firms. Weiser, for example, which has been working on Bell Farm, is very familiar with these documents from the city and working with our public works staff. So it seems to be working sufficiently. The issue is when it's time to make some changes to the raised crosswalk discussion that we've had, that's where we can have that council direction with the policy change without having to amend the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, and I would say most of, the engineering comments that you guys see in the submittals, those comments are, addressing the access management policy, where Sean will write something like this, driveway is too close to the crosswalk, something like that. So engineering staff will, they usually take care of that in their review. And so by the time it gets to plan commission, all the comments are already there. And so it's, yeah. And then again, with what Mark was saying, then it's also easier to update with new standards and such.
Okay, any other comments on that?
Mayor, with your permission, I have just a few questions about discussion on the standards that I might have missed between the two meetings, but maybe they weren't covered.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Before you start? 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm sure they're fabulous, but before I forget, I think Alder Nairo brought up the last time about, and if she didn't, we may have talked in passing, or someone told me, and I was thinking of Alder Nairo, I'm not sure, but bikes at transit bus stops. Is it?
I think it was Alder Wokus asked for
It
the
was Alder
bike,
Wilkes.
bike parking to be
Okay.
at the,
And this wasn't completely appropriate here, but I think one of the first topics was on bicycles and it passed my mind. In that case, please share my thanks to her. If that's on your screen, in your front burner, that's cool. If not, keep talking to us about bicycles so that we can be bike friendly. And I'm sorry to delay your comment.
Yeah, no, I just have some questions.
Okay, we have it
Were-
on the screen in case you want to. Is this from?
Okay, but I can't scroll, so.
Oh, okay.
Was there any incentive for green building or LEED certified buildings? Because that doesn't seem to be something I remember seeing.
I've discussed this with various parts of the code with Kelly. We don't have this on the screen right now. I'm happy to get you information. I just don't have it at my fingertips.
So it's
right now.
part,
Yeah,
we have something in there.
yeah.
I thought we had some density bonuses or
We
height
do.
bonuses.
We do,
for-
but I can't speak to specifically LEED standards. I can't recall exactly how we handled that.
Okay. Was there any path for non-traditional or experimental building methods to be built in Middleton?
That's
And
not
that's
so much
more
a zoning
code.
issue as it is building code.
Yeah, but how are these linked? Because there's certainly design standards within the zoning that we've talked about. So how are these linked? And is there any path for anyone to build a house with a non-traditional or experimental method in
Straw bale
architecture?
construction, for example.
For example, but there's there's certainly other things that are being developed at this point.
The zoning, again, I see that as building code because zoning deals with how a lot is configured and setbacks and height. And the method of construction is more directly building code related, but obviously it has an effect on facade, like type of materials that you're talking about for the exterior, right? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Mhm.
How to answer that? I don't really know. I mean, is there a specific, like, are you talking about the timber frame construction as an example that was proposed, or what are you thinking of?
I mean, I'm always reading things from Finland and Norway, and there's just crazy stuff being 3D printed and bamboo and just all kinds of things are considered. So there seems to be a problem with moving some of these green building technologies forward and at an affordable manufacturer's level, because cities don't allow within their building codes these types of structures to be built. And I wondered if there was any tie-in with the zoning, since we're looking at that now, would there be some sort of helpful path we could open up for that?
I guess if there was a barrier, that if zoning regulations created a barrier to allowing those new ways of construction, that would be a concern. But I suppose if there's an issue of, like, if a lot size doesn't allow a certain, I'm just thinking out loud here, but if we had certain dimensions or configuration of lots that didn't allow an efficient use of resources, maybe that's where zoning would come into play. But I can't think of outside of the building code process, I can't think of a direct zoning link.
What comes to my mind is, well, first of all, I agree with what Mark said, is that our hands are kind of tied with the state building code because the city of Middleton adopts the state code. But I wonder if maybe we could create a path through the comp plan amendment whereby we would have a section or an action within the green city section that would say, we are, obligated to conform to the Wisconsin State Building Code, but the city supports alternate methods of construction. And if there are barriers within the zoning ordinance, the city would consider rezonings to PDD on a case-by-case basis in order to support methods where appropriate or something like that. I can't really think of how to include it in the zoning ordinance, but that would at least give the plan commission a path, to consider the thinking through the comprehensive plan.
Thanks. And then the last one was if there's any sort of ordinance that is regulating the sidewalk cafes or indoor outdoor spaces. I know that we have some in Middleton and some are proposed. And I'm wondering if there's any barriers to those being developed, or if there's any way that we can encourage more of that indoor outdoor space.
There is an application fee requirement, which I know at least during the pandemic, the council viewed that as a barrier because they waived that fee requirement. So, there maybe could be something done through the fee structure or a way to make the permitting process simpler. Where does that exist within city code? Do you?
So the sidewalk permit is under license and ordinance, license and permitting. Typically, when we do receive like a sidewalk cafe permit, it has to be on like public right of way. So I think really the last one that we reviewed was Pascal's in Middleton Hills. All the other ones that have been like sidewalk cafes have all been on private property. So those have usually just been like a standard design review. But even with the sidewalk cafe permits, there is, a line that says it has to go through design review with plan commission, which could also be a barrier. And, there is still, review, like the police department has to review it for, their standards and everything. But I mean, if that's something plan commission would like to encourage and, not necessarily need a full review of it, that could also be another option.
I'm just wondering why we have so few in Middleton.
So few sidewalk cafes.
Yeah.
I like this topic. I know I was neutral in the last topic. I like this topic. I don't know how to encourage it, but maybe we can do a business spotlight or something. And then
I think we should have an incentive for converting surface parking to cafes. That's it.
It's funny that you think we have so few. I feel like in our downtown and Middleton Hills, we have several examples, and Monk's. I mean, they're sidewalk cafes in terms of their patios that spill out of the restaurants, if that's what you're getting at. World of Beer has that.
I think.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking of where these exist.
Well, I think Urban Herbans is talking about like those parklets where they convert a whole street parking space.
That would be even better.
And we don't have any of those.
Now we're talking.
And that's something we've talked about internally about something we want to.
They've done a couple of places in downtown Madison. It's turned out quite nice because of that.
That's right.
Yeah.
King Street.
King Street's quite nice. Yeah.
So I think those are technically allowed here. It's through the sidewalk cafe permit, but
except that I don't think that they would be as well received with engineering staff on the street. We did talk about this during the pandemic, and our staff had discussed an idea where we would actually have the infrastructure needed for a portable one, which we would allow businesses to use and then move it from place to place just to kind of pilot the idea.
That's getting beyond zoning though.
Yeah, that is getting beyond zoning. Yeah, it's true.
but I'm thoroughly enjoying this. Feel the need to go on our next bike community events to the outdoor cafes next year. That gives us a full year to try some things. And yes, we're off topic. My apologies. Did you have any other questions?
That was it. Thank
Does-
you.
Does anyone else have additional comments since I had my bike transit topic, but going in the overall topics? Okay, hearing none, we're moving to adjournment. Do I have to accept the adjournment or do I need them? No.
If we've reached the end of our agenda, you could just declare it, but I have no objection if you want to vote. I'll move that we adjourn.
Okay, I'll take that move. Next time I'll grow. Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, have a